r/nosleep. Posted by u/grego525. I witnessed an unexplained death that surpassed my wildest imagination. I am a detective inspector in London, and this is the story of how I became responsible for cases subject to the paranormal. I hope I won't get fired if I share this information. Nonetheless, I won't share any specific details regarding the exact locations of some places, just in case. Anyway, it was my own boss who told me that I should write things out of myself to feel better, so here we are. My first strange case like this took place years ago when I got a phone call from my supervisor CDI Brown, and he asked me to investigate the crime scene in Epping Forest, where some hikers had stumbled across a corpse. As soon as my conversation with the chief detective inspector began, it was clear this wouldn't be a typical case. He spoke in an unnaturally tense and urgent tone, something I had never heard from him before. His usually cool demeanor was replaced with a sense of foreboding. Something happened in that forest. Something that I am not sure how to deal with, he noted. I knew something sinister was about to happen. We arrived at the forest in 2 unmarked police cars, with a convoy of officers on board. It was nighttime, and there was an eerie sense of darkness that seemed to engulf the surroundings. The trees were tall and thin, their branches swaying gently as they swayed under the wind's caress. We could only guess what mysteries lurked underneath them. It felt like something out of an old horror movie, but we had no choice but to press forward into this unknown land. As we traversed deeper into Epping Forest, our steps grew heavy as if weighed down by its oppressive atmosphere. No matter how dimly lit or loud our lights shone, it seems that fear still managed to permeate through all else until eventually even sound ceased altogether. Nothing rose above its dense silence except for perhaps a few hushed whispers from some unseen presence watching us explore further inside. I half expected creatures such as dragons or monsters emerging from behind tree trunks any moment now, yet strangely enough everything remained eerily calm during these explorations, almost too calm. Eventually, after several minutes of cautiously stepping forward, we arrived at the crime scene, which was already surrounded by a few hikers who had discovered the body. The area was disturbingly quiet, and a chill ran down my spine as I saw what remained of this person's corpse. The details were gruesome. The naked body had grown into the thick trunk of a tree as if it was being merged to become part of its own vegetation. The limbs were still intact, although they seemed distorted and bent in unnatural ways from the force that inflicted them. Leaves had sprouted from their once human fingers, and roots seemed to have taken over most parts, giving off an air of tragedy instead. Whatever creature did this must be incredibly powerful for it to have such control over nature itself. My mouth hung open in disbelief, and I gasped. I felt my knees tremble and my throat tighten from the sudden shock of what I'd just seen. "Oh my God," was all I could manage to say at that moment. We quickly cordoned off the area, and after collecting all relevant evidence, sent out teams throughout Epping Forest with instructions not to leave until any trace or clue was collected. The deeper mystery eluded us even hours later, however. What kind of being could possess such power? Its presence still haunted me to this day. I couldn't help but wonder what secrets may remain hidden deep within Epping Forest. The hikers who found the body were a young couple, and the girl was crying on a rock. His boyfriend tried to give her some comfort, but his efforts fell short as she held back tears of fear and terror. I gave her a blanket in an attempt to help console her. No one should have had to experience such tragedy while out enjoying nature's beauty. Something must be done about this soon before any other harm is brought upon Epping Forest. The rest of us simply looked at each other with dismayed expressions. We were all just as frightened by what lurked beneath these woods, yet powerless against them. I turned to Mary, a crime scene investigator with a background in natural sciences. "What do you make of this?" I asked. She stepped closer, her eyes wide with disbelief as she surveyed the landscape. She ran her hand through her hair and shook her head. "I've never seen anything like it," she said in awe. "At first glance, I'd say we're dealing with an unknown natural force." "Where are his clothes? And what the fuck was he doing here naked?" "I have no idea," Mary noted. "Now I understand why Brown was so reluctant to say more," I remarked, and decided to look around the area. The moment I stepped away from the body, an eerie feeling came over me. The air was still and heavy, almost too calm, as if some unexplainable force had silenced every living creature in Epping Forest. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, and with gun firmly held in my hands, I ventured out of the crime scene on my own to find something, or perhaps even the source of this unknown power. My keen eyes scanned everywhere around, eating up any particular detail that may have escaped us while we were handling other matters at hand. Scoured the ground for suspicious tracks using all available light sources, yet found none, nor did they lead anywhere else further down our path either. I clutched onto my gun tightly with each step forward, now more attuned than ever before, determined to discover what secrets these woods may hide. As I continued onwards, the hair on my neck began to rise and a chill ran down my spine. there was something in here with us, something that we had been missing for far too long. I could feel it all around me, yet it remained invisible to our sight like an intangible monster silently lurking within these woods waiting for its next victim. The air suddenly got colder and cold sweat trickled slowly down my forehead as a gust of wind passed through me, sending shivers throughout every inch of my body, almost scared now more than I felt back at the crime scene earlier this night. Despite being increasingly afraid by each second, however, some inner instinct drove me forward towards unknown paths. Perhaps shouldering any fear while knowing one cannot turn back or not trying would be futile against such darkness always helps push mankind into dangerous adventures, right? As I reached a small clearing, I heard creaking noises from the bushes and I stopped. I scanned my surroundings with my flashlight but did not see anything except for the dark shadows of the trees and bushes. At first, I thought it might have been an animal, but as the noises rose again, I stopped and focused my light on the shadows. Someone was walking and the twigs were cracking underneath. I aimed my gun and pointed towards the noise. At that moment a young woman dashed from the shadows onto the clearing, stopped and looked directly at me with large terrified eyes, her heaving chest rising in ragged breaths as she was now fully exposed to light. Only then did I realize it wasn't an animal. Unable to even speak, she clearly seemed traumatized by whatever forces lurked in these woods. The woman had a slim, pale frame with long dark hair and eyes that seemed to be filled with fear. Underneath, her arms were tightly clenched as she stood in the clearing, her body trembling from the shock of being seen. Her clothes were tattered and stained from whatever she had endured until now, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she cowered before me. My heart was racing now, but my duty as an investigator prevailed. I had to find out why she was here in Epping Forest, although something deep inside of me told me that it would have been better if we hadn't found her at all. I approached her cautiously, taken aback by her silence. She was trembling, her eyes vacant and glassy. Her clothes were tattered and muddy and she looked lost in a daze. "What happened, miss?" I asked in confusion, but she didn't answer. She seemed to be in a state of shock. I didn't want to put any pressure on her, so I wanted to make her feel comfortable. After surveying the area and realizing that I was closer to my car than to the crime scene, I suggested that we head there instead of backtracking, and I had seen enough at the crime scene anyway. We walked in silence until we reached my car and we both got in and drove off. As we drove away from the crime scene, my thoughts were racing between the woman and what we had witnessed. I simply could not comprehend how a human body could be incorporated into a tree. Growing up, I was always reading science fiction that touched upon time and space travel, but this was something entirely different. I wished that Mary could provide me with the answers I was looking for in terms of understanding the situation in a rational way. My mind was racing. Did this woman have something to do with the murder? Or did she see something that nobody has ever before? She was clearly traumatized, so something must have happened to her. I shifted in my seat, my eyes were fixed on the road. "So, how did you end up in the forest?" I asked awkwardly, my voice was cracking with nervousness. "You see, there was a terrible crime a bit further away where I found you. Did you witness anything unusual?" My question was ridiculous. Of course, she witnessed something unusual, otherwise she would not have been in shock. But I just wanted to open her up a bit. She did not respond. Instead, she was looking out of the window, her eyes glazed with pain as if memories came flooding in. As much as I wanted to press for further details, something inside me told me not to. I have to tell you, there was something dark and mysterious about her. It seemed as if there were many questions left unanswered, which made me curious to know more, yet I found myself feeling an apprehension based on fear of what new information or secrets we would uncover during our investigation. Anyway, keeping discretion was my utmost priority in this case, so instead of pushing her any further, I decided it best just nod sympathetically and keep quiet for a while longer, allowing my colleagues time and space for whatever outcome awaited us both beyond that night. I called DCI Brown and told him about my finding. "All right, Watts, take her in and we will find out what she knows." "Jesus, I have never seen such a mess. See you at the station. We will have a long night." He nodded on and hung up. I could not agree more. We finally were approaching the police station and I could feel my anxiety increasing. On one hand, I knew that getting her to the station was an integral step in finding more answers. On the other hand, it felt almost physically painful to be taking someone who had been through such trauma, no matter how desperately they needed help. The woman's face was pale, her breathing shallow and rapid as I parked the car outside of the building. She turned to me, her eyes wide and imploring me not to leave her there. Her hands clutched at the edge of her seat as if clinging to a life raft, and she shook her head slowly, silently begging me to stay. Although her lips were pressed into a firm line, her fear was palpable, and it seemed like nothing would persuade her to step out of the car. Quickly, I thought of a plan. I killed the engine and told the woman everything will be alright. Just wait a few seconds, I will be back, and got out of the car, locked the doors and headed straight to the dining room of the station. After 2 minutes I found myself inside and with shaking hands, I prepared a cup of Earl Grey as quickly as possible, almost like an athlete pushing their body beyond physical limits in order to devote every ounce of energy into winning the race, hoping against all odds that it might help settle her down until DCI Brown arrived with his team shortly afterwards. Sure enough, just as I exited the building, I saw police cars coming and there was my supervisor coming among them. However, I did not see the vans of the coroner and crime scene investigators, which suggested that they were still out there collecting evidence and traces. I waited until the cars parked and DCI Brown got out of the car and he walked up to me. "Ah, thank you for the tea," he said and took the mug from my hand before I could say a word. "I am telling you, Watts, our government is in a huge mess if they are experimenting with secret military weapons." He ran his fingers through his bald head as if he had had hair and he stopped to look at me, his eyes widened and full of worry, and then he sipped from the tea. "What about the couple who found it? They went for a romantic walk when they came across the body. I think they have lifelong PTSD. Where is your witness?" He barked, his voice rising in pitch. I gestured with my head towards the direction of my car and started heading there. "Be careful, boss, she is having a trauma," I noted. "Don't worry about that, my wife is the same after having sex." Then came the next shock that night. When we reached my car, I was amazed to find that the woman was no longer inside. She was here in my car. "Right here," I said, pointing wildly at the empty passenger seat. At first DCI Brown thought that maybe someone had taken her away, but then again there were no signs or suspicious activities around, so after an hour-long investigation, we concluded that she must have fled due to fear and apprehension, trusting none other than her own instincts perhaps more than anything else, nevertheless leaving us behind with a million unanswered questions and theories which only increased our worries. But the question was, how? How did she get out of the locked car? Then something hit me. The cameras. The parking lot had a lot of cameras, so I suggested taking a look at the footage. We arrived at the control center and an officer ushered us inside. We were all standing nervously around a large flat-screen monitor as the officer was preparing the footage. Tension hung thick in the air, and I could feel everyone's racing heartbeats in sync as we waited to see what was hidden in the video. Nothing. I was alone. All along. The camera at the entrance confirmed that there was nobody with me, no one on the passenger seat. Even when I pulled into a spot and parked, there was still nobody there. All the while, it felt like I was speaking to someone, but in reality, the car was empty. My first thought was that I went crazy and that was the end of my career as a detective. Brown said softly as he placed his hand on my arm in an attempt to soothe me. I jumped out of my chair and shouted, "That's impossible. I'm not going crazy." I could feel my heart pounding as my tight fists trembled at my sides. "Go home and try to sleep, we will continue the investigation tomorrow." That night, rest was a foreign concept to me as all I could think of was finding that woman. I lied to Brown and said I was going home, but in reality, I was walking the streets, stopping anyone who looked suspicious in the futile hope that it might be her. My desperate wandering eventually led me home, exhaustion slowly taking hold of my body. The next day I was like shit and I started the morning with 2 double espressos. I knew that I was going crazy if I keep trying to find that woman, so instead of concentrating on her, I shifted my focus to the victim himself. I knew where I had to go. The crime lab was as tranquil as ever. I couldn't understand why it had such a calming effect on me. Maybe it was the dim lights, or maybe it was the utter stillness of the place. It seemed as though time had stopped, and no one was in any rush to get anywhere. "So what do we know about this person? Do we know who he is?" I asked Mary. "As you could see, he didn't have any IDs on him," Mary said as he was setting a microscope. "Yeah, but he has fingers to take his prints, doesn't he?" "Well, not entirely," she said calmly. A furrow of worry appeared between my eyebrows as I asked, "What do you mean?" "He doesn't have prints," she said. I shifted in my seat, my impatience growing. She held my gaze, her expression unreadable. I waited for her to elaborate. She did. All his fingers were severely burnt. Whatever it caused, she was exposed to some very strong radiation. "Look, Watts. This is the most fucking weird case I have ever had and I have no idea what we are dealing with. The team is there, they are cutting out the tree and bringing the whole trunk into a police hangar. After the medical examiner and I examined it thoroughly, I can say more." That was enough for me. I thanked her, got out of there and headed back to the crime scene, despite Mary's protests. Something in my gut told me I had to be there and see firsthand what was going on. The team was working tirelessly on removing the trunk of the tree and its root. It seemed impossible to remove such a monolith, but they were doing their best efforts, making it as if nothing could stop them. Now that it was daylight, I could make out the contours of the man in the tree, his eyes wide with terror. I was wondering what the last thing was that he had seen, but I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. "Be careful with the body. It's crucial evidence," someone shouted. Then a massive excavator, which I had no idea how could get there, was used to carefully remove the object from the ground and lift it out of the dirt. Once the enormous root was uprooted, something on the ground caught our attention. We walked closer to investigate what it was. Slowly, it became clearer that the man wasn't the only victim there. Deep in the ground, there were the skeletal remains of a human being. They were laying there in plain sight, and we completely missed them during our first inspection of that place. We were all stunned by what lay before us. The trunk with the body and the bones was transported to the police hangar. Mary determined the number of strange injuries on the body. Some of his ribs were broken, his tongue was torn out, and he had some low level of radiation. These injuries just added more to the question until a truck driver called the police. "I have found a car near Epping Forest on the side of the road. Its door is open and the car is empty," he said. My curiosity sparked, and we immediately drove to the place he described. When we got there, I could see that it was indeed an empty car, and it certainly looked like a crime scene. All of its windows were smashed, bits of glass scattered around, and what felt like some kind of wild frenzy had taken place. From one glance at this vehicle's interior, you could tell something terrible had happened there. Blood on the front seat, bent handles ripped off from somewhere else, indicating violence or struggle between two or more people. Whatever transpired here must have been horrific for someone. It seems that the driver suddenly stopped and ran into the forest, I concluded based on the skid marks and the signs. "What the hell frightens someone to do that?" one of the officers asked. I couldn't answer that question. I opened the glove compartment and retrieved a driver's license. The name on the ID was Ben Hudson. It was obvious who it was, even though the face of the man in the trunk was deformed a bit. But why did he stop and run into the forest? I did a quick estimation in my head. The trunk was approximately a half-mile from the car. The cuts and bruises on his face became evident, and I realized that he must have been running through the woods at night. The branches must have smacked him in his face as he ran. But from who? Or what? I wanted to know more about this Ben Hudson. Back at the station, I checked if he had a criminal history. To my surprise, he did. It turned out that Ben Hudson had a wife who went missing 3 years ago. The police investigated him thoroughly and took several items from his home as evidence, things such as clothing fibers and trace amounts of unusual chemicals that could have been used for nefarious purposes, but still nothing implicating him in any wrongdoing towards his wife's disappearance was found within this material evidence, or anywhere else for that matter. My search on the internet found out that no one reported having seen him on the day she vanished, nor did anybody report seeing anything suspicious near their home at the time. All leads turned up empty-handed every single time investigators followed them through with meticulous scrutiny. However, I was the kind of investigator who had always claimed nobody was innocent until proven. There were several ways to commit a crime and mislead everyone, including the police. After I read some more articles on his case, I was taken aback when I saw the image of his wife, Veronica. Without a doubt, I recognized her. Because he was the woman who I took to the police station. I felt the blood drain from my face and my mouth went dry, and I was rooted to my seat in absolute terror. I didn't read the results of the DNA analysis because I already knew whose skeletal remains they were under the tree. I didn't get surprised when the official results stated that he had brutally murdered his wife because I already had a guess. I didn't tell anyone the reason why he abandoned his vehicle and dashed into the woods, for I was aware that no one would have believed me. Needless to say that officially, the case is still unsolved. Cases like these have been delegated to me ever since. The only question I still ask myself is, what is worse? Being the victim of a brutal murder, or being haunted for years until the forces of hell take revenge? My actual case. When I look into a mirror, something is watching me and nobody else can see it. Part 2. I am a detective inspector in London, and the cases transferred to me are, in a way, usually the subject of the paranormal. Earlier, I shared my first paranormal case with you. This time I am going to tell you about an ongoing murder investigation, which is, to be honest, freaking me out. My phone buzzed and I saw the name of my boss on the screen. "Watts? Get to the Hotel Lion right away, I've got a case for you," he said. For reasons, I am using a different, imaginary name. The Hotel Lion does not exist in London. I was still groggy, it being 5:30 in the morning, earlier than when I'd normally wake up. I wondered what my boss was doing that early, especially at a hotel, and I had a feeling that something was off. Nevertheless, I proceeded to get ready so that I could join him. By the time I arrived at the spot, the sun was already up. The Hotel Lion glimmered in the morning sun, its tall windows reflecting off the cobblestone streets of central London. Sleek and modern, it stood out among the other grey brick buildings, its shimmering facade a testament to human ambition. I parked my car at the parking lot, walked into the building, and I showed my badge to the receptionist, who told me that colleagues were waiting for me on the third floor. My footsteps echoed down the third floor hallway. As I rounded the corner, I noticed that a group of police officers had clustered around the end of the hallway, murmuring among themselves. My supervisor, DCI Brown, spotted me from the crowd and beckoned me over. His face was pinched with worry. "Come and take a look inside this room. I'm not sure what we're dealing with," he said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? What room?" I asked. Brown gestured towards the open door to go inside. With a heavy sigh, I followed his instructions and turned my gaze to the door, feeling a sudden chill race down my spine. "What am I looking for?" I asked, although I knew the answer before he said it. The first thing that caught my eye was a dead body on the floor. The body had no marks or evidence of struggle around him. The only clue to this mystery was that he had carefully folded up his clothing in one neat pile beside him, as if for some ritual purpose before taking off into the afterlife. His face showed signs of extreme shock, as if something inhuman had suddenly possessed itself upon him just moments before passing away from this life forever. The air was thick with tension as I carefully surveyed my surroundings. A single desk lamp illuminated in its corner, vintage furniture aligned against three of the walls, ruffled velvet curtains pulled close to protect from any outsiders viewing inwards. But most notably of all were two mugs with half-drunk tea placed on either side of an armchair. "He registered under a fake ID. Larry Smith, and the address he gave doesn't exist. The guys have already checked it," Brown added. "I see. So someone was here beside him? Could he have been murdered?" I asked the CSI investigators, my voice raising in confusion. "Yes and no," a voice replied from behind me, and I stumbled back in surprise. Our medical examiner Susan stepped out of the private bathroom, her eyes wide and her posture tense. "What do you mean?" I asked. Susan crouched down to the body. "Discoloration around the lips, ears and nails. These are the signs of cyanosis. The skin turned blue due to a lack of oxygen." "Oh, honey, you must have suffered quite a bit," she said, and adjusted the hair of the dead body. "So he was strangled?" "No, because there are no marks or bruises around his neck." "Pillows?" My gaze diverted to the bed and I caught sight of a few pillows. "Possibly. But we need to take samples from those pillows to make sure." I knew why Susan said that. The bed was immaculate, as if nobody had ever slept on it. "So what the hell was going on here?" "Ask him," Susan said, and I turned around to find a young man in a navy blue uniform standing at the door. The gold buttons that adorned his blazer glinted in the light, and he wore a peaked cap with the hotel's emblem stitched onto it. "I am Richard, and I am the one who escorted Mr. Morgan to his room," he said. "So he was alone?" "Definitely. Nobody else checked in with him," he replied. "Did he have a guest?" I asked. "That's the weird part. I went to deliver the room service order and opened the door, only to discover absolute darkness. He was seated on the couch in the dimness and commanded me tiredly to set down the tray on the desk. Yet I could swear I heard someone in the restroom. After that, I left in a jiffy." "Are you sure he wasn't alone?" I asked. "Absolutely. There was somebody in the bathroom taking a shower and he was humming a song." "He?" The voice was more like a male than female. "How about the CCTV?" I asked, my interest etched into my face. He rubbed his chin in thought and nodded. "Yes, we have cameras on every floor." "I need every single one of these if I'm going to be able to analyze them properly," I said, my voice heavy with authority. I had almost finished up my work in the hotel room, but as I rounded the bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a figure standing behind me. He had on an olive green raincoat, and his face was hidden in shadows. All I could make out were his eyes. They were a bright, piercing blue that seemed to penetrate right through me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. He seemed to be staring at something, but what? I jumped back in surprise and fear. "You all right, sweetheart?" Susan asked me. I realized that nobody else could see it besides me, which terrified me even more. I had no idea what it was in the mirror, but the hairs on my arms stood on end, my skin prickling with the feeling that the thing in the mirror, as I realized that the thing might have been coming for me. I had never seen anything like it before, and I felt a chill run through my body as if someone had walked over my grave. Was this some kind of spirit or demon? Or maybe an illusion created by the hotel's haunted history? I didn't know what to think, but all I wanted at that moment was to get out of there as soon as possible. I rushed out of the hotel and quickly got into my car. As I turned on the ignition, I glanced back at the mirror. To my horror, I could see the same figure still in the back seat, but he remained silent, not saying a word. I felt a wave of panic wash over me and I turned the mirror away, so I could not see him anymore. My hands were shaking as I drove back to the police station, my mind abuzz with questions and fears. Who or what had I seen in that hotel room? What did it want from me? Was there a connection between it and the missing man? Why had nobody else noticed this figure in the mirror except for me? I made a mental note to investigate further into this strange occurrence. For now, I would have to study the CCTV footage and hope to find some answers. I inserted the USB stick into my laptop and started playing the video. On the screen, I could see Rick, the bellboy, and a man in a suit walk into the room. Then Rick left the room and closed the door behind him. An hour later I saw Rick deliver an order to the room, but there was only one dish, despite 2 people being inside, as he had mentioned. I was confused. Why did he only order 1 meal if there were 2 people in there? Afterwards, I noticed that no one else ever entered the room. I saw people walking around the hallways, but they never went inside. No one exited the room until the morning when cleaners found Rick's body. I also took the records of the camera at the reception desk. He was a tall figure with a cut on his cheek, and his movements were jerky and anxious like he was trying to hide something. He kept looking over his shoulder as he spoke with the clerk as if someone was coming after him. Other than that, there was nothing else. I needed to know more about this man, but before I started doing my research, I went to the restroom to take a pee. Afterwards, I went to the sink to cleanse my hands. That's when I saw his frame again. His hood was pulled down low, creating a deep darkness that seemed to cover his face. Then there were his 2 pools of azure blue eyes, so piercing that it seemed he was looking straight through me. A chill ran up my spine, and my hand instinctively reached for the penknife I kept in my pocket. In a panic, I flung it wildly at the mirror behind me, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. I was standing in the restroom, still frozen in shock from what I had witnessed. I jumped at the sound of DCI Brown's voice behind me. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the doorknob, surprise and confusion on his face. What in the world is going on here? I stuttered out an explanation. I just can't get over what I saw today, boss. His expression softened and he said in a gentle but firm tone, "You look like shit. You will use some time off when this case is solved. You need it because otherwise, you will go crazy." I could not agree with him more. It was then that I realized how truly strange the events of the day were. That figure in the mirror, I could not shake him from my mind. Was he real? A figment of my imagination? I shuddered at the thought and decided to get back to work. There was a moment that day when I went to the kitchen and I could see his reflection staring back at me again, even on the door of the microwave. His hood pulled low and his blue eyes pierced through mine like daggers into my soul. It sent a chill up my spine and left me feeling more unnerved than ever before. I needed to take a walk. My pulse raced as I stumbled out of the station, my gaze darting from window to window. Everywhere I looked, the mysterious figure was staring back. His reflection winked at me from on top of a parked car, then a storefront window, then a glass skyscraper. I felt like a rabbit being chased by an invisible predator, and my steps quickened with every reflection I saw. I made a beeline for the pub down the street. I was in desperate need of something to take my mind off this case and the strange figure that seemed to haunt me. I ordered my favorite drink, Jim Beam, in a plastic cup of course, which weirded the waiter out a bit. Then I sat down at an empty table in the corner of the room. It was early in the morning and the pub was surprisingly lively, but not too crowded as many patrons were on their way to work. The atmosphere was calm and soothing, with the sound of soft music playing in the background and the gentle murmur of laughter and conversation filling the air. I sipped slowly on my drink, letting its warmth seep through my veins as I watched all around me. Just as I was about to take my last sip, my phone started ringing. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was DCI Brown. "Watts? Where are you?" His voice sounded urgent over the line. "I'm at the pub down the street from the station," I said hesitantly. He sighed audibly before saying, "I need you here now. There have been some new developments in this case that we need to discuss urgently. The victim's real name is Kenneth Bracken and he lives on Canvey Island. His fingerprint was already in our database. He was arrested earlier for a minor crime. You might want to look around at his address." My heart sank as I realized this was not going to end anytime soon. With a heavy sigh, I finished my drink and headed back towards the station, resolved to solve this case, whatever it may be, once and for all. I'm in my office now, waiting for the search warrant. I have a foreboding feeling that the truth lies in his home, and my gut tells me it may not be pleasant. Something deeply sinister is waiting for me, I can sense it.